Hello and welcome to Season 2 of the Soccer Coaching Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Scott.
And I'm your other host, Mark.
In each episode, Mark and I will discuss the key topics that impact on football coaching in the foundation and youth development phases. We will share our thoughts, ideas and experiences, and whenever possible include guests so we can get their insights and opinions too. Thanks for listening and we hope you enjoy this episode. Hello Mark, we're back.
We're back, yeah.
It's been a while.
It seems like it's been a while as well, actually.
We've disappeared.
Unfortunately, we still talk quite a lot outside of the podcast. So
We just got to have the mics with us more often. We can just save ourselves loads of time just by switching the mics when we're in the car or something.
yeah, mics and cups of tea, that's what we need. Yeah.
How are you?
Yeah, pretty good, yeah.
Yeah.
Can't complain. A bit too much work, unfortunately, getting in the way of podcasts and things
Ridiculous,
like that.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but I guess that's the way of the world.
We need to find a way to monetise the podcast and then we can retire right into this all day.
Is that a little plug or a plea?
Yeah, a plea for some sponsorship. I think it wouldn't be as fun then, would it?
No, definitely.
All right, so we're going to do a topic today. I guess more broadly, it's kind of around practice design or practice approach. Would that be fair?
Yeah,
to say?
I think so, yeah.
It was your idea.
Yes. So we're going to talk about a games-based approach to training, right?
Okay.
I guess we're going to talk about some of the advantages, some of the potential disadvantages, some of the other options, and I guess how you can weave other options into it and things like that. That's the idea. And just see where it goes.
So before we start then, I know that if we've got some connoisseurs of coach or academic coaching out there listening, it can get quite technical around when you talk about a philosophical approach to something, can't it? And if you do look online and research this stuff, there are some definitions around things like games-based approach, constraints-led approach, ecological dynamics, those kind of things. So before we get ourselves in trouble, maybe we should just say that we're kind of doing this from a layman's version of it, not too scientific.
Yes.
So if we do kind of misposition or kind of misrepresent a more theoretical practice that's probably got 20 years of research behind it and stuff, we don't mean to do that.
Yeah.
We'll do our best to explain what we mean by the terms we're using.
Yeah.
And hopefully they marry up with what's in the more public domain. But this isn't a theoretical approach, right? This is kind of our version of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I was going to phrase that, to capture it. I guess it's our amateurish version of games-based approach.
Yes. Yeah, cool. And it is, I guess, the other thing I was thinking about ahead of the episode was it's a bit of like coach evolution for me.
Yeah.
I think when we come on to talk about what we do now and how we approach our training practices and then look back at how we were doing these things years back, you can see how it's evolved. And I would imagine probably the evolution that we've had is similar to many coaches.
Yeah. Where
you start off maybe looking a lot online for resources, picking drills and practices that you think could work.
Yeah.
And then later on, you take a slightly different approach, which we'll talk about, and how you kind of think about how you're going to set up your sessions and just your thoughts around why you would choose something over something else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that you kind of look for things, or I certainly did when I first started, was the stuff that looked quite orderly, that didn't have any chaos. Do you know what I mean? Even if there was kind of queuing, I guess as long as the boys were, or girls, whoever you're training, are under control, it felt like it was a good session. Parents could look and think, oh well, look, they're all doing what they should be doing, making nice passes from A to B. It looked like a good session. I think that was my first thought, rather than coming from it from perhaps a development standpoint.
It's that control word, isn't it? I reckon when you first start off coaching, because of maybe some insecurities around not having the experience and maybe not being fully confident, you feel like the more you can control the session, then the safer it is. Yeah. And as you get more experience and you get more confidence as a coach, then you can loosen up on the control a bit, can't you?
Yeah.
Which is a good thing in the sense of allowing for more chaos and probably more decision making and player ownership and more things to go wrong potentially, because that's what happens in the game, right? But it's that control bit in it. At first, you can't do that, can you? You need to make sure that all your cones are nicely lined up and
there's a lot of them.
And stuff. There's a lot of them.
Colour coordinated as well. It's really important. Small ones, big ones.
I haven't really changed about that one, to be honest. I've still got that OCD. So, do you want to give a definition of what a games-based approach is? How you see that? So we're on the same page, me and you, and obviously then probably our listeners too.
I can try to.
Go on.
Put it that way. So I guess my kind of simplistic view on a games-based approach is that the activity or the practice essentially is a game. It transfers to perhaps the games on a Sunday or midweek games that happen. It looks like a game in terms of it's got 2 goals, directional, things like that. There's no kind of queuing and things like that. It kind of maximises the touches of the ball for the players during the game. It's fun. They enjoy it. I guess that's my kind of thoughts or view on what a games-based approach looks like. And again, it is quite a simplistic view on things. I think the key for me is it looks and feels like a real game, and it transfers to perhaps Sunday mornings, for example.
Yeah. Okay. Would it have rules? Would it always be football?
Not necessarily. So I think there would be some adaptation to football. So perhaps, again, I think we've spoken about this before. Perhaps you'd have like a handball type game that you would use to encourage the players to find space. So they would, or like a netball game. So when they receive the ball, they can't run with it. So they encourage the teammates to find space. So that would be for me a games kind of based approach, and that would also kind of feed into what they would do on a match day.
Yeah. Okay.
And I guess the other thing is it's random as well. I know we talk about this random variable type practices. Then for me, a games based approach is always a random approach, or mostly a random approach.
Yeah, because it's a game.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think I'd be the same.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, the highlighted word I had was transference, which you said 2 or 3 times, which I totally agree.
Yeah.
I think, and because it's a game, you'd hope it'd be fun.
Yep.
Element of competition there, probably with points and scoring, because it's a game.
Yep.
It will have engagement then, hopefully, as well, which you mentioned. Certainly directional, certainly with defenders, certainly invasive, so, some kind of goal scoring system, certainly random. What I would say is, and I know this is what you were getting to too, is it hasn't got to be even numbers necessarily.
No.
It can have different rules, different teams. Okay, maybe constraints we'll talk about a bit later on, I'm sure. But so you can mix it up a little bit. But it is a game. You wouldn't go too heavy with instructions or rules with it necessarily, so from the outset. So something that's relatively simple for the age group that you've got can get into it pretty quickly and can compete without having to kind of understand too much.
Yeah.
With regards to the setup of the practice.
Yeah. I think the key point there is to make it's tailored to the age group, right?
Yeah.
So perhaps if you've got under 7s or under 8s, you might not do a kind of passing through the thirds type game. Whereas if you've got under 12s, 13s, 15s, 14s, something like that, you perhaps would do it with those age groups. It would work better, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, or even it's a case of ability as well. So as the game says, what level of skill set they've got. But even with something like passing through the thirds, I think as long as the instructions were quite simple, you might not use those phrases.
Yep.
It might be a case of you can only pass over these 2 lines. You can't dribble over them, kind of thing. So suddenly you put a constraint in. I guess we're kind of going down this road, but you can put a rule in which brings out the purpose of what the practice design is supposed to achieve, but through a game. I guess that's what we're trying to say here, isn't it?
Yeah, I think maybe again the complexity comes in. Maybe for the younger groups, you'd maybe have the halfway line instead of the thirds, and then for the older groups, you would break it into thirds. So you got your defenders, midfielders, attackers type thirds. So maybe you could do something, but it'd be slightly different. Maybe a slightly more simplistic version.
Okay, well, I think what we're getting onto then is some of the constraints-led approach stuff, which kind of encroaches on this space a little bit, and I don't think the two are separate, especially how we use them, which we'll talk about some examples a bit later on. But just 2 things, I think. Let's talk about the benefits of a game-centered approach. You mentioned them already, but let's just say why we feel they're important. And then second of all, maybe we discuss some alternatives. So if we weren't to take a game-centered approach, what it would be.
Yeah.
So some of the benefits, I think you mentioned these already, but certainly you'd hope decision-making, right? Because the game requires decisions.
Yeah.
Some skill execution. So you need to be able to, have some skill that you can execute really within the game. So therefore, it's not just technique; it's actually a skill because you've got to do it opposed.
Yep.
Whether it could be a handball, it could be throwing, catching with the foot, it could be receiving the ball, passing the ball, shooting, twisting, turning, whatever it might be. It would probably require some gamecraft.
Yep.
Or technical awareness. Sorry, not technical, tactical awareness. I should say. Sorry, gamecraft, tactical awareness. So how can we compete in this game to get an advantage, individual, collectively, and obviously it should require some kind of physical literacy, physical fitness that's relevant to that particular game, which you'd hope transfer into what you want to do in the bigger picture of things.
Yeah.
So for me, I think they're the big positives. If I missed anything, Claire, and you'll be saying on the positive side.
I think that for me as well, obviously, is the engagement. Obviously, kids love playing games, right? So I think there's the whole engagement and fun piece is critical. You got no kind of cue, and everyone's involved in generally involved in the match as well. I think they would be key points.
And just to go back to the engagement one, you're right to mention it. And we say this every time we mention engagement. It's not engagement for engagement's sake. The reality is that if the players are more engaged, the efforts increase, don't they? Yeah. And therefore, the whole practice becomes more. The intensity goes up. The level of ability then is more challenging. So you get more out of the practice. So the wrong impression of engagement is, we do it because it's the right thing to do for the players. It's the right thing to do for you as the coach, because you're going to get more out of the training session. And I sometimes think that some coaches approach engagement and fun as a bit of a nice add-on. I'll do that because the players like it. It's a bit of fun. Yeah. So, well, actually, if you do that for the whole session, you'll get so much more out of it. Yeah. So the engagement bit isn't just a nice to have. Actually, it's going to make the session so much better. I know most people get that, but I think it's worth mentioning it again. There is a negative side to this, and I'm willing to recognise it. And I mean, it's the one thing that I think, I'm sure there's more than one, but it's the one thing I think that you do lose. Actually, I've got another one now, but it's the main thing I think that you do lose when you take a games-based approach. For me, it's the technique. I do think you sacrifice some of that technical training. I'm willing to say that out loud on record. Yeah. I think that's a trade-off here a little bit. Now, it hasn't got to be, because you can manage it in different ways. But, if you were to say, right, if we take a purely game-based approach, therefore we just design games with some creativity and some purpose. So it's not about just throwing a ball in, which we'll come on to again, I'm sure, in a bit. But, a well-structured game that has transference to what we want to achieve, and has player ownership and direction. It's has goals and everything else. I think what you don't always get an opportunity to do, because of the randomness of it and the invasiveness of the game, is work on technique.
Yeah. So you suggesting the repetition side, they don't have the repetition of that technique, or perhaps they don't get a chance to practice a particular technique.
I think if you're taking on, if you look at the spectrum, okay, if you, real basic, let's just say passing the ball with the inside of your foot, a real basic skill. Old school passing the ball would very much be, if you really want to get good at it, stand against the wall or get a player, or get one teammate and just keep pinging 50 times, 100 times, just repetition, pass, unopposed, pass. Get the technique right first. Yeah. Then maybe we'll add some interference, some movement, and then add some competition. So you get a real nice technique, receiving the ball, and then passing that ball, passing and receiving. Exactly. Yeah. And I get that, and I think you would get a really good technique from doing that. Now, if you take let's say you did a small-sided game of 3v3, working on passing and receiving, so you put in a rule where you had to pass over the halfway line, so you're taking out dribbling as being the only option. You have to pass at some point, something real basic like that. Then I think the game would do a lot for that, and players would have to work on their passing, because you've got to get the ball over the halfway line at some point. So there won't be as much as doing it just me and you passing back and forth, but there'll be some passing in that game. There may be a better constraint you could put in to do that, but that's just a quick example. But what you wouldn't necessarily get is the opportunity to really hone that technique within that kind of pressured, competitive, opposed environment. I think you would learn to use your body, to protect. You would learn to pass quick. You would learn maybe to be creative in your passing. So there's other things you should get from that. But I think if you're looking purely from a technical point of view, I would concede that I think there probably is a trade-off if you just took a games-based approach.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. For me, the question is then, if you took time out of that games-based approach and you put a practice on that just focused on passing back and forth, you've done that for 20 minutes, it may not be as fun for the players. Would they get more out of that and then going back into a game after? So you kind of, maybe it's like a whole approach. So you have the hold, which would be the start of the game, and you could use the game that you're referring to. Then you go into the part where you're doing the practice. You get the high repetition, both feet. It may not be opposed. You could then move it into. It could be started unopposed, then move it into opposed. Then go back into a game, and maybe you adapt to the game. So it's, passing for points, for example. So the more passes you do before a goal, that goal equals the number of passes. So you're encouraging the team to pass the ball. Would there be more value in that than doing a complete games-based approach?
I 100% think there would be, yeah. We probably don't use it as much as we should, because I think we're both fans of the whole process. But you're right. For me, that sounds like a sensible approach. So you put on a game that works on the principles you're looking to practice with those players. Yeah. You see how it goes. Now, you may be pleasantly surprised, and they're all particularly brilliant at it. Happy days, keep playing the game, adding some constraints and some more challenges, individual or collectively, depending on how the players are getting on. But if everyone's got the fundamental basis of a good technique around what you're trying to do, then maybe you don't need the part practice.
Yeah.
Certainly maybe not for everybody. Or maybe there's ways in which you can challenge and dial up in the game to work on things to make it more challenging. So you know they're already good, so we can challenge them without going to more technical practice that's challenging too. So it keeps the fun and the engagement and the transferableness to it. However, if all or some of those players, it isn't quite happening for them, then maybe the part practice has its place in. So you kind of have that part practice ready to use. You put out if you need to. You deliver a more kind of either constant or slightly variable practice that hopefully is still fun and engaging and everything else, and maybe some element of competition or something else, but gives them an opportunity to work more on their technique. May not be all the players. It may be just one or two or three or four. You've got to manage that carefully, obviously.
Yeah.
So you don't kill confidence. Or you do it for everyone, but they have different levels of challenge within that part practice, depending on how good they already are at that particular element to it. And then you go back into the whole practice and do the game, where maybe you release some of the constraints during the game, so it becomes more free flowing to see if some of those things remain as it becomes completely random with none of the constraints that you've put on it, to kind of maximize some more repetition within the practice itself.
Yeah.
For me, that seems like a sensible approach of doing it all. That's fun, that's more relevant. The reason I think that's a good way of doing it is from the coach, you get to see how the players are performing before you put anything in there really too technical, because they might have a different approach that you've not thought of to solving this problem, which might work for them. So I might be able to coach a nice way to receive the ball on the back foot, take a touch and pass, using the inside of the foot. But they may have a different way of receiving that ball and passing that just suits their body style, their, the way they move their body, their physical literacy, their understanding of the game. It might work. So let me have a look at that first and see. If they're really struggling and can't find a solution, then it's my job to coach to be able to go in and help them, surely, and that's where the part practice could help potentially.
Yeah.
But A, there's that. B, what it's giving the players an opportunity to understand where they're at as well. Yeah. So when you now pull them out for a part practice or something else, or you say to them, look, Scott, really good. Love the work rate. Love the effort. Really good. Let's get that passing game right. Come here. Let's do some work over here. Nice, positive, constructive. The player's not going to complain if you've got the right environment for that. They're going to get it. Yep. Mark's getting this right. I want to be as good as Mark at this. So let me come out. Let me have a little go. I can work with Scott, the coach, on a couple of things. Then go back in and see again and see if that's getting me better. Yep. But they get it as they're bought into it. So they're not. They understand why they're doing something maybe that the rest of the players aren't, or just a few of them are. Yeah. But it's positive. This week's not their strength. Next week might be their strength. And you'd hope that would be put across in the right way. But I think those two things just mean, to me, that's a better approach than possibly doing the other approaches to this, which we'll talk about in a bit, I'm sure, in which you could have a different way in which to get there, potentially.
Yeah, I agree. I think, again, that comes back down to the environment you set, right? If you set the right environment, you keep it positive, then that clearly is going to work. You're not going to have any kind of problems without that approach. Now, question for you: the team that you coach at the moment are fairly technical. They're strong, relatively strong players. They play a lot of football.
That's different though. I think they're strong players. They're 100%. Go on. I wouldn't say they're as a collective now. I don't. Yeah. I got different levels in here. So yeah, I wouldn't say they're technically way above where they should be for their age.
No.
I think as players, I think they're very good. I think their game craft and their competitiveness is excellent. I think. Because I think we do this approach, but I think they're technically, some probably could be technically stronger if I had taken a different approach. But that would have been a trade off for some of the games in other areas. I think, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't think I was going to suggest they're technically above where they are, but they're technically reasonable, so that they will control the ball, they can pass the ball, that kind of point.
Yeah.
If you were coaching a team that perhaps are at the other end of the spectrum, and there's obviously boys and girls that are not into football as much. They don't play as much football, and perhaps they're not. They may struggle to control the ball and pass the ball. Do you think that a games-based approach, or this whole piece that we spoke about, do you still think that would work for them?
100%.
Or would you go back to be more practice-based?
No, I thought about it a lot, and I get it. It's a really good question. I see where you're coming from now. So your level of players isn't quite as competent with the basic foundations just yet.
That's
so where do you start from? Yeah. No, I get what you mean now. No, I wouldn't, and I'll tell you why. Why do we have to make it less fun for players that haven't played as much football now?
Yeah.
Now, at no point did the players that we've currently got in the under-8s team, that are pretty good players, start off on that process.
Yeah.
They got where they got to by playing lots of football.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the other bunch of players aren't quite there yet. They've just played less football. Yeah. At the moment, that's the biggest difference. There might be some physical stuff and then a bit of competitive application for football, but that's it. But why not? What I would do is play 1v1s and 2v2s. I'd actually play 3v3s, but with a keeper, because I think that's the best game to start you off. 2v2 with a goalkeeper either end, because there's everything in there. There's passing, there's beating players, there's dribbling, there's shooting, there's goalkeeper, there's saving.
Lots of touches.
Everything in there.
Always engaged.
Exactly. Now, I might even put 2 balls in there to really to up the intensity and stuff and keep them playing. Play with 2 balls in, let's go. Play 2 balls and just keep playing the game. We'll see who gets 1,000 goals first kind of thing, just go crazy. What I do have found personally with players who, for the age group, are probably the slightly lower ability group at that moment in time, it's their application to playing. It's the wanting to go and compete and stuff. That's the biggest difference between what we might call an A, B and a C team, generally speaking. And it's not always about ability, but you just need that tenacity to want to go and compete. And what you tend to find is, if you look at the amount of hours that players have played, it's just the fact that the boys in the A team have probably got older siblings, often slightly older in the birth calendar year. Not always,
certainly
but
at the younger ages, in
the younger ages, and have just played a lot more football because they've wanted to, they've enjoyed it, they got into it early because they had the appetite to want to go and play and enjoyed it. Where sometimes the boys and girls in the lower ability groups just haven't had that switch go on them yet, so they've just not played as much. So can we create an environment in which they really want to play and enjoy it? But why I don't see going back to a constant practice is going to ignite that personally. Maybe it's because it didn't work for me personally, but I don't see how getting little Jimmy to really love his football is going to work if I just get him passing back and forth to me for 20 minutes. Let's get him in a game and let's spark the game off. And maybe this is a bit of a closed mindset approach by me. My worry would be, if I can't spark it off in a nice 2v2 or 3v3 goalkeeper game, then I would be more concerned that maybe little Scott isn't really into football yet. And maybe that's the problem here, rather than his ability to play football. He's not into it yet. And maybe in 6 months or 6 years he might be, and who knows how good he could be as a player once he wants to start playing. But right now, maybe he's just not really. He hasn't got the same bug as Mark's got right now. And actually, if he had the same bug as Mark got, he might be all right. But he might be just as good, in fact. But until he's got the desire to want to go and play for himself, not just because mum and dad want him down there playing, or not just because he feels like he should be there, but until he really wants to go and play this particular game, we may be limited to how far we can go with this. I would be surprised if taking him out of the game and just doing a constant practice with him would be the answer to that. It might be. Hey, try it if you think maybe he or she would love that approach. But I would be surprised.
I think that's fair. And I think the other way to think about it as well, you have opportunity to set homework, right, and challenge them outside of your training session. Perhaps that's where you can challenge the players to do do little skills at home or in the garden, or go out with mum or dad and do passing back and forth, just to keep practice that technique. So I think you're right, and I think even with the team that you coach now, I don't recall any of these kind of constant practices, and the boys are able to control the ball and pass the ball. They generally get their body shape in a good place. I don't recall a lot of training around body shape. I think there's been little snippets of information you've given them, but there's been no specific technical coaching on those aspects, right?
No, and I think you can see that in the way some of the boys play, if I'm honest with you. We've got a range of boys in different abilities depending on kind of what the challenge is and stuff. But one of the boys who's very impactful in games, he's a cracking competitor and stuff like that. He doesn't do, or hasn't been doing, much outside of our coaching with the club. But he's very tenacious. He's a great cracking little player, and he's got a couple of really good techniques that work for him, defensively and offensively. But he's not. You can see he's not been technically grooved, as you might put it, which isn't a criticism by any stretch. He's just learnt to adapt to play to his strengths. But because we've challenged him in ways that those strengths have to work as a goalkeeper, as a defender, and as a front player, that they're universal strengths. It's not just that, okay, you're great at that, so keep doing that. The positions have made him, so the game's made him have to develop these abilities that he's already got, but there's been no technical training there. Now, to be fair, some of the other boys who do things outside of what we do have got some technical stuff. My own boy, for example, he's got better technically in certain areas of his game, nothing to do with him whatsoever. One, playing against his older brother helps a little bit, but more what he does outside with the academy club that he's at, kind of thing, the development centre he's at. So that's helped him work on certain things, which is great because that complements other areas. And I know that's the same, a few of the other boys as well, in different ways. So you're right. I don't think I'm necessarily the best technical coach anyway to do that. But B, when I've got the players together, I think the best use of their time is challenging each other, and we've seen it. So creating a game in which they have to compete against each other, and they're good players.
Yep.
All got strengths in different ways. But if you're playing each other, you're gonna get better playing against any of the boys that we've got in the team. So let's get them playing against each other. That's the advantage we've got.
Yep.
So to almost spend time not competing against each other almost seems like, God, it's got to be a really good practice to me to sacrifice that to do that. And I haven't got the creative skills to produce one myself, and I've not found that many, although there are a few out there I actually quite like as unopposed practices that I think are pretty good. We don't use them as much. I think I would do more unopposed practice and maybe part practices as the boys get slightly older. So we've had them find the 6, 7s and under 8s now. I do think there's a growing place for that as the under 8 season unfolds and into under 9s, under 10s, because I think they're ready for it. I think they've enjoyed their football. They get it. They want to get better, so the appetite's there. They appreciate learning. So I think I can build in some more of that part practice and unopposed stuff now, maybe as the months and years unfold, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I think you go in the UK, we go to 7-a-side at under 9s, and you go to 9-a-side at under 11s.
Yeah.
So even at 7-a-side, you start to create defensive, I guess, a bit more, not necessarily defensive formations, but the formations become a little bit more interplay, right? This, how you set the team out, and I guess you could break it down, and you could have practices in regards to your attackers versus defenders, for example. I guess you still do that really at 5-a-side in your 5-a-side training, still attacking versus defending, 1v1, 2v2. But I guess maybe you set it out a little bit bigger, and it becomes a smaller part of the game.
Yeah.
It's still game realistic, but it's just a breakdown of perhaps just in the defending half kind of thing.
You can focus on certain areas of the pitch a bit better, maybe in 7-9 side than you can in 5-a-side, because 5-a-side is so random, and that's the idea of 5-a-side, isn't it? Just to be football, go and play. There shouldn't be too much analysis about formations, positions, and stuff like that. Just play, and get on the ball and just enjoy it. However, I personally believe you still need a formation at 5-a-side football just to give some structure to the players and help them understand.
Right?
Exactly,
because fluid after that.
Yeah, exactly, very much so. So that's your starting position, and then things move around, but some structure there. But it does, so because you want to plant some seeds within the game that you've got that are going to work for the future of what the players do, right? Ultimately, 11-a-side, 90-minute football, playing to win. That's a long way from where they are now, so let's not carried away. But actually, understanding what a formation is not a bad thing when you're 8 years old. Yeah. It doesn't. Don't get me wrong. I still think that should be as fluid as it can possibly be, which is why we do the 2-2 formation. We speak about this quite a lot. But even the 2-2 formation, that's your starting position. Really, what you're doing there is encouraging the players to play at least 2 positions within that one formation. Then within the game, they're playing at least 2 positions within that formation themselves in different times. So that changes again. So we're not, it's not restrictive. It's not limiting. But if you just said, right, players, it's a 5-a-side, pick a goalkeeper, the other forward, play beyond it, off you go. I think, you're probably not making the most of the opportunity to get some principles of playing and some ideas around formations and using space, stuff like that you could do with that age group that, doesn't hurt them moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what you start to do then is actually introduce some kind of principles of play, right? You talk about things like balance,
exactly,
when defending and attacking.
It's nothing too complicated.
Supporting the play if you're a defender, all those kind of things, right? Without really drumming it into them, you slowly drip feeding this information in over a number of years, and 100%. then when they get to an age at 7-a-side, perhaps it becomes more and more relevant.
Do you know what
they're really aware of it?
If you look on the Monday Night Football, the debate analysis after the football, how much
good days, right?
It's really good. But how many times do you hear coaches or the pundits talking or they're assessing games say the exact same things that we say to the players at the weekend? Not overly complicated. Use the space, work back, communicate. It's these simple things, and we're doing that with 7-year-olds now, and I think that's a good thing. Don't get me. What we're not doing is patterns of play and using too technically advanced language, but the basics. And when you see the people analyse it, they use basics. It really is finding space, closing down space, communicating to each other. Just basic body shape. It's just real things. Where could you be there? And I think, okay, that's 11-a-side football, but the principles are the same at 5. It looks different, but the principles are the same at 5-a-side football. The danger is the coaching is not to treat it like 11-a-side football and not to treat the players like they're adults, because they're not, and they're learning the game. So you can expect the players to get it right if they're playing in the Premiership, but you can expect the players to get it wrong when they're learning under 7s.
The players in the Premiership get it wrong, right?
Exactly.
Often.
Exactly. We were going to talk about some of the, before we go on, maybe a bit more detail about games that approach and some examples, and also introducing constraints. Just, we might have touched on it already, but okay, if you're not taking a games-based approach, what are you doing?
Well, I guess there's other things you could do, right? You've got kind of basic practices, which is your kind of, which I guess could be a constant practice. You could have a bit of variability in that, but it's, I guess, more of a constant practice. The other thing you've got is wave attacks, which actually is something that I quite like, actually, and I've used them a lot. Well, I used them a lot with my under 10s team last year, and when they were under 9s. That's things like, if you've got an overload, you could have a start with a 2v1 with a wave attack, and then so you have two attackers against one defender. That kind of 30 seconds that closes, and then you got another 2 coming on against another defender, and then another 2. So you just kind of rotating it round. You got wave attacks, and I think I found that very. I think that firstly, I think the players enjoyed it. They found it a lot of fun, especially the attackers found it a lot of fun. I think there's a lot of options within that, so you can start with a 2v1. You can progress to a 3v2. You could probably bring in a recovering midfielder to kind of try to create balance from your 3v2 or a 2v1. It also, I think the other benefits as well is high repetition. So if you really want to practice an outcome like, I guess, getting in behind or finding space, you can really link that to principles of play, and there's a lot of repetition within that. So that's something I'm always keen on, something I like, and you can run those 15-20 minutes, and there's just lots and lots of and it is a little bit like it's games approach as well, right? It is like a games based approach to a certain extent.
Could you use a wave practice as a part practice to a whole part whole?
I think you could, yeah.
So you do your game, and if you can get a good wave practice, then that's a nice way of kind of almost dialing down, but not too much.
Yeah.
Still some interference there. It's still, it's certainly variable. It might not be completely random, although it could be.
Yeah.
And then go back into it. That might be one way.
You could, yeah. So you could have, your focus could be attacking overloads, right, for the session. You have your principles of play linked to that particular theme. So it could be creating space, it could be penetration. Then you could set your game up, I guess, with a 2v1 in each half. So it's a 3, or you could have with goalkeepers, I guess, a 4v4. And so you've got your overloads in the attacking halves, each overload attacking half, and then you play the game, and then you come out of it and do your part would be your wave attack 2v1, and then go back into the game after, try and put into practice that repetition, those learnings into the game. So I guess you could do, yeah.
Yeah, sounds like fun, and the players enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely.
I think when I did my first coaching badges, I think it's changed now, but the FA was certainly pushing much more on the constant variable random approach. So you would kind of do a skill unopposed, repeat it lots, then have a slight kind of some interference or something variable about it, and then go into almost like a game with it.
Yeah,
stuff. So I get that, but I think the argument's been, or the counter argument to that has been, perfecting a technique in an artificial environment doesn't guarantee any transference to becoming a skill when it needs to, in an opposing environment. And I firmly believe that.
Yeah.
I think you need to almost somehow try and, as much as possible, marry the two together, so you've got that action perception coupling going on. However, if that doesn't work, then you need to look at maybe going to a wave game or some kind of part of practice. If that doesn't work, then look at maybe constant variable random. So it's not saying don't ever use it, because it's got to be what's the best for the player or players that you've got, right? So it's a tool you can have in your toolbox. I just would say it's not it maybe shouldn't be the starting tool.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think perhaps some of the FA thinking's changed a little bit over time, certainly with some of the Pete Sturgis roadshows that we've been to, and with some of the Twitter games that he puts on now. A lot of it is games based, right? Even when it's 1v1, there's always a kind of, it's like a games based approach to a certain extent.
Yeah. So there's something else that kind of muddies the waters here a little bit, and we've mentioned it in what we talk about with the games that we've done, but I think it's worth mentioning a bit more. There's this thing called a constraints-led approach.
Yep.
Now, this is underpinned. It's a framework that's underpinned by the ecological dynamics. Now, this gets a bit technical and complicated. We don't need to go over it really here. I don't think we're necessarily capable of going over it here, but I do think we do some of this stuff. and I could be corrected here. I think to really understand the constraints-led approach, you need a real deep understanding of the sport and also skills learning. So I think maybe that's where our limitations can only go so far. But here you're looking at really how you can put some kind of restrictions or some kind of emphasis on elements of a game which allow you to focus more specifically on what you're trying to achieve in that session. So when we talk about games-led approach, it's the challenge then becomes, okay, how do you create a game then, whatever they look like, that's going to work on playing through the thirds or playing out from the back or finishing chances or creating overloads or defending outnumbered? How can you create a game to do that? Because I can see it doing a constant variable random practice. I can do that relatively straightforward, but how do I do a game to do that? And that's where I think we start adding in constraints, which gets us roughly in the space of the constraints-led approach.
Yeah.
And here, the feeling is really there's three things you can probably look at to influence, to work on a theme. That would be the individual.
Yep.
So putting a constraint on the player or players, looking at the task.
Yep.
So that's kind of the game in many ways, or the challenge you put forward to them, and looking at the environment itself. So that could be, the physical space that you've got or the equipment or something else. So there's three big areas in which you can manipulate and adapt to be able to then create a practice that is a game, but should encourage some form of repetition of what you want to work on.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So if I think about it, then so if I think about how I plan up my session, then I primarily go into it thinking, what games can I do? I then think about what is my theme for today. So my theme could be, my theme is passing, and specifically my principles of play for that of finding space, creating space. So then are you saying it's how you weave that principles of play, that theme into your game? So what constraints do you put on that game so you get the outcomes that you want in terms of passing the theme and your principle of play of making space?
Yeah.
Creating space.
Definitely. I look back and think of the hours I spent on the internet looking at YouTube videos or researching for particular drills or practices. That was my starting point a few years back. Yeah. So you kind of think, right, we're going to spend the next 4 weeks working on the player's ability to pass the ball, in different ways, different times and different spaces on the pitch. We're going to work on that. So what good pass practices are there? Google passing practices, see what comes up. Yeah. And then you're trying to crowbar some of these things you find completely different teams with completely different coaches, completely different environments, completely different equipment, completely different principles, completely different information, and actually so much stuff you don't know what's gone on around that practice itself. But a 5 or 6 minute YouTube video, you think, oh, I like some of that, I'm going to try and do some of that. And you try and put that into your practice. Yeah. Now, that's not a complete car crash, because there's some good stuff. You can get some good ideas.
Yeah.
But I think if you take it as the approach is to give you ideas, I think that's still okay. The difference now is you take your theme and I think, okay, I'll start with the game. Right. What would that in a match? What would that look like? So if we've got a match tomorrow, how would that play out in practice? What would really good look like if they could do this stuff that we want them to do? What would it look like? So if there's a passing thing, well, I assume then it's being able to receive the ball, with a good body shape in a good position, being able to scan, look at your options, and be able to pick a range of passes, short, long, medium, forwards, backwards. Knowing where you want to play the ball, depending on your principles of play. Ideally, playing forward first potentially, but that depends on the team and the culture and your philosophical approach to playing the game. But you've got to know what that would look like, what would good look like. If you could watch a video now in advance of 24 hours of the game, wow, and you could have a highlight show, that's what I want to see. Right, that's what you want to see. How can we encourage that to happen now in the game? Being realistic. So you start with the game and you think, okay, then I've got to think about the constraints I can put in place to be able to manipulate that to happen. Either in a sense to give it an advantage to happen, so to encourage the likelihood by making the game maybe easier, to give it an affordance, so there's more likely that is going to happen, or to create a constraint or change on a player or the team to make it harder for them. But you can look at the individual or the task itself, the rules of the game or the environment, to try and manipulate that. So a bigger pitch, maybe potentially a bit more space, the formation you select, what one team's allowed to do compared to another team might allow these kind of things to happen. And this is where I think, for me, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here, but as a coach, I would love to have the ability to be able to be given a theme, think relatively quickly on my toes when I know the players and the equipment and everything else that we've got, and then be able to manipulate a game with some nice constraints around either the individual, the task, or the environment, to be able to maximise the opportunity for those players to practice that theme in an effective way that will give that transference, that fun, that engagement, the decision making, the ownership, the skill execution, the game craft, all that stuff within that game that I've created. Recognising there may be some sacrifice on technical craft, real technical detail, but I could pick that potentially with a part practice or something else if necessary.
Yeah. Sounds good.
It sounds good.
And I think it makes sense. I'm just coming back. I do think there's still some benefit in the research you do in terms of seeing other practices from Google and from Twitter and things like that. I think what we've learned is you can't just take them and use them. You need to adapt them, as you say, to your players, and then think about how you maybe even can you use that in a games-based approach or constraints-led approach. So I do think there's value in those things, and there's also a lot of value in going and watching other people's sessions, right? Other coaches, or if you can even get to some of these academy development centres, just go and watch what they do. Sometimes you can learn things there as well.
You're right, because what you can do if you've got a mindset that you believe in this, you don't have to. There may be much better ways of approaching practice design, and hopefully we'll get some feedback on this one and we'll hear some different ideas.
Yeah.
But at the moment, that's our approach to practice design.
Yeah.
So when I go and observe other coaches, I'm kind of thinking about how I can take some of those ideas and put them within the way I want to do things. So it's not saying I want to take that like practice. Where's he put his cones down there, or where's she, what words she used there to talk to the players. It's more about, okay, if I can pinch a bit, how can I manipulate that now into the way that I want to do things in what I believe is the right approach for the players. So you can't really lose, can you? But I think before I would have been almost just taking up lock, stock and barrel and replanting in my session, where it's good in the sense that I feel like now when I do a session, it's my session, it's unique, but it's also challenging in the sense that you're almost starting from scratch. So
it's harder work, right?
Harder work, more things to go wrong, more unknown, constantly challenging yourself, constantly thinking of what you could have done better. It's not a safe place to be from a coaching point of view, and also therefore it's not a guaranteed success route for the players either. And so it's a little bit of a gamble, and you recognise these players haven't got an opportunity to practice their under-8 season again. They're going to get one shot at that, and they put themselves in my hands. So you're constantly kind of thinking, well, I don't want to sell the players short, but I also don't want to compromise on giving the best experience possible. I can do something better than what I've done previously.
Yeah, I agree. So I guess that leads on to the question, do you think that coaches need experience to be able to use a games-based or a constraints-led approach? I'd give you my thinking.
Yeah, go on.
You think,
please.
I'd kind of, and I'd mulling this one over before and I was kind of thinking it must be quite challenging, because as we were talking about from when we first started coaching, it was difficult, right, to be able to envisage these kind of things without actually having some experience and seeing other coaches do it. So I think it is definitely a challenge if you're a new coach. What's your thoughts?
I do. I almost want to say no, it's fine, anyone can do it, but I don't think that is the case. I think you need to have one or more of a few things. Firstly, I think you've got to be able to have great empathy with the age group you're coaching.
Yes.
I think that's fundamental.
Yeah.
Possibly the most important thing, because if you can't really understand what's going to work for the players that you've got, how can you design a practice that's going to work for them? Really, you just kind of throwing things in the dark.
Don't you?
You need to get on the level 100%. That's why I coach under-8s.
Yeah.
Straight in there. Yeah. But it's true. I think you need to be able to empathise with them. And actually, I think I don't always get that right by any stretch. And you can forget how young the players are. But you've got to try. You've really got to try from their perspective, because then you can think about, okay, what's going to be engaging and what's going to be fun, because you've got to value those things. And if you don't, I think you're making a mistake as well. So with my biased head on here, that takes me down the games-led approach. I think we've got to start with the game then. So I guess to answer your question, the better I understand the game of football in this case, and all the things that come with that, the better chance I've got of designing something that's going to work for them in practice for the age stage that they're at, right?
Yeah.
And we've worked with coaches that, maybe haven't watched as much football or played as much football as we have. I'm certainly no expert, but I spent a lot of hours watching and playing the game. I've never been very good at it, but I've certainly spent a lot of time watching them. So I kind of get it. I think I'm probably better on the theoretical side of speaking about the game than I am necessarily of coaching it, because I kind of, you just the amount of hours we spent around the game and watching it. But so I think what that enables me to do is think, right, I get what it's like as an end product. So therefore, how can I dial that back now to the players that I've got on the stage they're at to try and design something that's going to work for them? And I think that's a big advantage for me. And I think that helps me. Do I get it right all the time? No way. Could I do things better? 100%. But I think it's not a bad starting point to be. And the boys have benefited from that. And if I didn't have so if you took me and said, right, Scott, go and do basketball now, I think, okay, I could probably do an okay job, but no way could I do as good a job as someone that's played a fair bit of basketball. No way. I would do an okay job because I'd be able to empathise with the age group. I'd get that. I kind of get games, and I get the idea of fun and competition, and I create good environments, those things. But I think I wouldn't be able to do the players justice in the way I would set up a game and challenge them with the affordances and the constraints to be able to really get the most out of a session. And it wouldn't be fair.
So you would be able to set something up which the kids would enjoy. And the environment would be right and things like that.
Some basics, which would be fun. They'd walk away from the session, they'd have a laugh, a good time, physically demanding, done some basic stuff around basketball that I think I'd be safe with. But you know what? Some of the little things that make our little team quite successful in the sense of not winning games, but in exercising the principles of good football as we see it. I know that that's opinion too, but trying to play football we believe is the right way, and rotation, doing different things and teamwork and stuff. I think they're in place because I've got a good understanding of football. That's what I think. I couldn't be able to. I don't think I personally could transfer that into other areas because I don't know many other sports as well as I know football. I like cricket a lot, but I certainly couldn't coach cricket. I watched many sports, but I couldn't do. I'd be blagging it even more so than I do currently with football.
Yeah, and funny enough, I was. It's a good line of discussion actually, because my eldest son has started to play badminton, and I take him along on a Friday evening.
But your coach goes on, doesn't it?
Well, and I get to play on the side actually with my youngest son, so it works quite nicely. But I was looking at the coach, and the coach he's very good, like technically superb. He knows you gives them the feedback. This is when you should be hitting it. Always hit it when it's up. Don't let it drop. Aim for the back of the court. Hit it when at this point, and all these things. He's great technical feedback, but he's quite old school in his approach and the way he can the environment and things like that. And I was thinking to myself, could I put something like this on? I was thinking that I could probably create a better environment. I could probably understand and get on the level of the kids a bit better, but actually I would struggle in terms of the technique piece. I could let them play, but I wouldn't be able to give them all of the technical aspects. So it's
because you need to know what the technical stuff is, right, to make this game. And I don't know badminton at all, but what I would say there is you could say, well, I tell you what, to the players, we're going to play a game. They know how to play the game. If you can win a point with an overhead shot, then that's worth double. So now you're encouraging the players to try and hit the ball, football. There you go, the shuttlecock earlier. So there's again, I think once you know some of the basic stuff, you can then be clever with how you manipulate that into a game or a condition that's right for the age and stage of the players that you've got. But you need to know the game first, don't you? And it's hard. And no doubt by the time that we've got to the latter stages of our coaching careers and we're the old fossils, there'll be the new upstarts saying, oh, he's really good at what he does, but he doesn't get the new way of delivering these things. It must be hard once you've kind of gone through a process. Definitely. And the challenge is to keep our delivery fresh, right, and up to date.
Yeah, totally agree.
Just to finish off then, look, just for the last few minutes, and I guess the real challenge here is let's back it up with some examples then. I mean, it's the how, right? I think we've given a reason why we might take a games-based approach. We spoke about putting constraints there around the individual, the task, or the environment. The other ways in which you could do things with the whole practice, or wave practices, or constraints, variable and random. But ultimately, then, if we're going to do a games-based session, what's it going to look like? Have you done any that's worked that you think could be a good example?
Yes, I've done a lot.
I was going to say, please don't say no. You're thinking of the one that's...
No, whether they worked or not, I guess you'd have to ask the players. They felt like they worked okay for me. So I guess something that I use quite a lot for under 11s and for under 10s and for under 9s is really and I've kind of mentioned it a bit already, is the principle of play of finding space and supporting the play. So they would be like, for me, is that they're two critical parts of your principles of play, and then it's building your practices around that, around building your games around those particular concepts. And I've done a kind of few different things in terms of small-sided games to bring that out. So one of the things that I've done was passing for points. The game I mentioned, passing for points. So you really encourage the players to
explain that, because that's a great example. So the theme here is trying to encourage passing, isn't it?
Yep.
Really, but for a purpose.
Yeah.
If I'm one of your players and I've turned session, what happens?
Depending on numbers, obviously, we'd have 2 small-sided pitches set up. Ideally, we'd either have a 3-a-side in each pitch or a 4-a-side, again, depending on numbers. I would talk through what the practice design, how it works. I probably wouldn't have goalkeepers have 2 small metal samba goals, and I would talk to the players around what the theme of the day is and the special focus of principles of play of finding space and supporting play. And then I would talk through the game. So we'd start off with a game which is called passing for points. So you've essentially got 2 options. You can either score a goal without passing as a team. You can dribble and take the whole team on and score, and you'd get 1 point as you normally do. Or you can play the game, and where it works, you pass the ball, and the more times you pass the ball before a goal, the more points you get. So if you make 6 passes in the lead up to a goal, you get 6 points. But critically, obviously, if the attacking team intercept the ball, then you kind of start again in terms of your counting. But if the team then nicked it and scored, they would still get a point for that. So you still keep it realistic that they get a point for at least a point for every time they score. But you try and encourage them to pass the ball, and you also encourage them throughout the game. I guess when as a coach you kind of step in a little bit at times, encourage them to find in space, and you're asking questions of the players. Are you supporting the play? Steve, are you finding space? That kind of thing. Throughout the whole game, you're kind of asking those questions. You let the players run the game, you let them count the number of passes, you let them keep score, but you are then just challenging them in kind of individually. And you could have, if you've got 2 coaches, you have 2 of those games going on. You then bring the players in after kind of 5 minutes or so, 10 minutes, talk to them, find out what's been going well, what hasn't kind of gone well, and explicitly bringing it back to your principles of play. You then challenge them to the things that haven't gone well. How can we make them kind of better? What can we do? And then they go out. You maybe get them to spend a minute or 2 talking as a team, working through how they think they can play better in terms of those principles of play. And then you get them playing, and then they play, and then you bring them back in, have a chat, and then you adapt the practice after that. So perhaps you move it on from passing for points to perhaps either passing through the thirds or passing to cross the halfway line. You have to pass the ball, something like that, right? So you keep this like a constraints-based approach to the game, but that it keeps the focus of the outcomes in focus, what you're trying to get out, I guess.
Super.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I've seen the game. We played it ourselves. It's an excellent game. It's funny. I think a couple of things I would say personally, and you've done this as well. So I think it came across, you'd explain quite a lot from the outset, and I've seen you do it different. You can just play the game. Yeah. So don't say nothing almost. Tell them what the rules are, right? It's quite simple. Game 3v3 or 4v3, whatever it is, doesn't matter. So what numbers are, off you go. One team bibs, one team non-bibs, off you go. The only rule is it's a point. You get an extra point for every pass for the goal you score. Nice and simple play. Off you go. And suddenly, you give them 5 minutes, they work it out, and so they've scored 5 goals with no passing, and the other team's just scored 1 goal with 6 passes, and it's winning, and then you bring them in and say, what we're working on today, working on passing, right, exactly why, what's something about passing, okay, good, go off you go again. So so that the players, you've said nothing really apart from the rules. You haven't just write the rules on a whiteboard and put them there and just point and blow the whistle and tell them to play, and just I think there's a lot to be said for just keeping it simple and not saying too much. You then obviously, if they're not getting it, you can do a part practice, like you said, bring them out and do something like that. But again, you can manipulate the rules, so you could say you can only pass forward. Yeah. So you can dribble back, but you can only pass forward. So then you might have different challenge there, or you can only pass back, but you can dribble forward, different ways. Definitely. There's different things in which you can manipulate the game depending on what you want to get out of it. But you need to know what your theme is and your coaching points. I think it's still important. This is where it still is about coaching and not just about throwing a ball in there. You still got to know what your coaching points are, and you still have to look at and observe the game. Think, okay, who's getting it, who's not? Where can I help? And how can I help in the best possible way? Is that a little flyby with a quiet word in the ear? Is it a stop and a whole explanation? Is it doing a part practice? Is it doing more of a constant, very random because they're kind of way off this one now. And that's to me, that's the art of coaching now. But you started with the game.
Well, I think the other thing you give players little challenges as well. Perhaps you got a player that isn't so great on the ball, but the challenge for that player is actually, I don't want you to pass the ball. I want you just to dribble the ball, to dribble with the ball. That's it.
You could have one team set up who can't pass, and one team that gets the passing for points.
Exactly,
so you can. It really can be. That's about being creative in your thinking and stuff. And that's where I think, if you want to write the next book about something, write that book, because I'd buy that book. I want to know different ideas around different constraints that you can put in place, depending on the theme of a session.
And I think, just coming back, I think the interesting thing is here. I always like to give the boys information, not too much information, but give them information up front to say, look, these are the principles that we're focused on today. If it's creating space or support, what does that mean for you? And I try to ask them what it means to them before they go out and play. Then I let them go out and play. And then I always try and link it back to those principles.
Is there any value in not telling them up front?
I don't know.
And giving them 5 minutes to play and then asking them.
Perhaps not. Perhaps there isn't. Perhaps
I don't want to see you get it straight away without me telling them personally. Honestly, I just think I'd rather just see a little bit. I'd rather just give them as little as possible. I'm not saying play for 25, just even if it's 2 minutes, just 3 minutes, just let them play and just see who's got it straight away and who hasn't. And then you bring them in and then you ask the questions, because then it's like, okay, now I get it. And actually, some won't have got it, which they'll need the guidance, but their teammate would have told them, not you. Some will know it, but just have chosen not to do it. But now they're going to step a little bit up and make more of an effort and stuff.
Definitely,
I've got one really simple one, and I'm only going to say this one because I think this is one of the moments when the whole game-based approach switched on for me, and we might have mentioned it in a previous podcast. And obviously, a younger age group, so working at the very foundation phase here, early on in their football journeys, very early, at the very start, in fact. And I remember hearing a few times in reading blogs or listening to podcasts about the challenge that some coaches have with younger age groups in not buzzing around the ball, finding space. How do you get them to do that, or to share the ball? And we brought some luminous headbands off Amazon for £1 each, some bright blue and some bright orange ones. And I remember playing a 3v3 game with a relatively small pitch, but two small goals either end to kind of spread the play a little bit. And you win the game by getting all your players to have a headband on, and you get a headband when you score a goal. So now once one or two have scored on one team, they've got to look for the other players to try and score a goal. So their heads are up now, they're looking, they're trying to get their player up front now into space, and they're trying to pass that player to create space. And the game just did it. It just went from being like, everyone buzzing around a ball, like bees around honey, to suddenly everyone spreading out. And the game did it. There was not one bit of technical coaching from me whatsoever. It was simply taking a games-based approach, putting a constraint on about you only win this game once all three players have got a headband on. You can go and score 20 goals if you want, Scott, but they might just score 3 and they've got 1 each. They're going to beat your team. And it's you got the stronger players then sharing thinking, advice, and you got the leaders giving some good tactics, some game craft understanding there. That's just a real simple version of how you can use a game-based approach with a bit of creativity. They love a headband, made it fun. Plus, when they were able to get a headband, you've created a 3v2 for the team that's already goal down here, so you create an overload to them. So can they exploit that? There's so much going on there. If you want to keep the game going, you said with 2 headbands each, but you can't get 6 headbands if everyone else has got a headband once, so you kind of keep the game going, so you add some more time into it. And the game's doing it for you. Do I need to understand about finding space and the value? Of course I do. Do I need to understand about making space off the ball, the importance of scanning as a coach? Of course, all these things are important. I need to recognise what coaching points I should be seeing and be able to intervene when I don't see those and help and give guidance, but more by asking good questions and getting the players thinking and sharing ideas about the challenge that the game's presenting them, not necessarily just giving you all the answers. Now, players, off you go, do what I've just told you, because I'm the coach, what I've said, do it the way I've told you, and then we'll have success. You find the solution to this problem, and I'll help if I need to.
Yeah, I totally agree. It was a great game, and I nicked it myself actually. and even we used it with the under 10s and under 11s, and they still love it as well. So even like 4 or 5 years on or older age groups, they love it.
It's scoring goals and beating teams with headbands on. It's just fun, isn't it? There's nothing. It's football.
And it's the added prop makes it. They kind of love it. And actually, look, if you haven't got headbands, you could even just use a whiteboard. Just get the players to write their name on a whiteboard.
Exactly.
And then that even makes them think, oh, who scored, who hasn't scored, so they're even more communicating. Rather, they can't see the headbands because there's no headbands.
Now you've got to think a bit more.
Now they're thinking, they're talking between them. So if you don't want to fork out for headbands, then a simple whiteboard from Wilkinson with a pen works equally as well.
100%.
And players love writing their name on a board when they
do, don't they? Yeah. Right.
Definitely.
So we covered it.
I think so. Yeah.
Anything you want to add? Any final thoughts on that? Or have we?
I think
we've done an hour.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, quite relatively easily as well. No, I think it covered. I think we covered everything really.
Okay.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to know if people have different approaches to these.
Definitely.
If they think we're wrong, 100% I'm all ears. Anything that's going to help our players get a better experience, please share what you're doing out there. If we've not explained it very well, please let us know. If there's things that you think make sense and sound great, please let us know. If you've got a different approach, please let us know. Definitely, and the benefits of that and the reasons behind it, and we'll share that on the next podcast. We'll share what we get back, if we get it back in time before we do the next one. And as always, we've got loads of emails again. It's been 3 weeks since we've got on the podcast last, so there's lots of stuff. I'm slowly working through responses, and I will get back to everyone. I promise that. We'll mention a few names hopefully in the next episode about our stuff. I enjoy it. It's just finding the time.
You don't get much help from your co-host, to be honest with you.
Well, look, but it's nice. It's nice to get the interaction. It's nice to get people asking good questions, and it's great to see some of the great stuff that's going on out there that people are doing. I know we're still a minority in the sense of probably our obsession with trying to do this, and the people that listen to us, I know that you're in a minority too. I guarantee you, this isn't the norm out there. Not everyone has. Is working as hard maybe to give their players the best possible experience and trying to learn and get better. But I know that we are, and I know that when we hear from our listeners, they are too. And that's what this is about. It's just sharing ideas. By no means have we cracked it, and it's a constantly evolving beast anyway. Yeah. And so, we need to constantly evolve with it. And today was just about sharing an idea and approach that we have towards the training that we do.
Yeah, agree.
If you want to reach us, then Twitter's pretty good, and that's @SoccerCoachCast. We've got the email address, which is info@thesoccercoachingpodcast.com, or you can put Mark out or Scott out if you want to reach us directly, but we get all those anyway. And if you can, like the episode, give it some ratings and that stuff through whatever podcast platform you're using, that would be brilliant. It'd be nice to get some more feedback on there. There's not been anything for a while, to be honest with you, so it'd be nice to get some feedback there. If you don't mind spending 30 seconds just clicking on the stars and writing a comment or two, that would be great. And hopefully it won't be 3 weeks till the next one, so we should get one back up in the next week or two.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thanks Mark, thanks
cool.
everybody.
Cheers, Scott.
Bye.